On the left here, you have the Patrone 88, and on the right, you have the 7mm Backcountry. The one on the left was developed in 1888, and the one on the right was just developed this past year. What do these two cartridges have in common? And while we're at it, let's do kind of an extensive look at cartridge history and development. The first smokeless rifle cartridge was the 8mm Lebel, developed by the French in 1886. Now, even though this cartridge here has a pointed bullet, originally it would have had a bullet similar to this. The Spitzer bullet did not come out for another 12 years. This cartridge, as you see, is rimmed, has a pretty significant taper in the cartridge, and it is the cartridge of firsts. Like I said, the first smokeless rifle cartridge, but also 12 years later, it became the first cartridge to use Spitzer or pointed bullets like you see here. 2 years later, another cartridge came out, the Patrone 88 cartridge from Germany. This cartridge could go by a long list of names, and some are accurate, some are not quite accurate, but people know what you're talking about. But so you're not confused, we're going to call it the Patrone 88. This is the second notable cartridge using smokeless powder. Once again, the first one by the French, this one by Germany. You know, it's pretty interesting that the first two cartridges that really started smokeless powder cartridges were both 8mm. And today in our world, 8mm is not very popular. There has been some other ones that have came and gone that were pretty cool cartridges, but it's really never been a popular caliber. But it all started with these two 8mm. Like I said, the 8mm Lebel is the cartridge of firsts, but there's some things about the Patrone 88 cartridge that really stuck, and people copied it again and again and again all the way until today. The Lebel cartridge with its massive taper and rim really has not been copied a whole lot. And so it's the cartridge that started it all. It's the granddaddy of smokeless rifle cartridges. It's really this cartridge, the Patrone 88, that we're going to talk more about today. Now, if you just look at that part of the cartridge, what does it look like to you? It probably looks like a 30-06, maybe a 308 or 6.5 Creedmoor. And that's because it is. All those cartridges really base their design on this cartridge when it comes to the base, web, / rim area. This is the first cartridge that I know of that had a rimless case. Now, if I'm missing one, please correct me in the comments. But I believe this Patrone 88 cartridge is the first one that really did this, and it became a really neat thing. It just simply works better in bolt-action rifles that have magazines. And so it had a rimless case, and the measurement of this case at the base here is .473, which would be the exact one copied by so many others. Now, there were other cartridges that came out very soon after, all predating the Spitzer bullet. So if you see a pointed bullet on some of these, just understand they all had the round nose, non-pointed bullets at this time. In 1889, the British came out with a 303 British, shown here. I believe in 1889 they actually did use black powder, but just a few years later they would transfer over to smokeless powder. Also in 1889, you had the 7.65 by 53 Argentine round developed by Mauser in Germany. Pretty similar to the Patrone 88, but not exactly. In 1891, you had the 7.62 by 54R, or the 7.62 Russian, developed in Russia. The United States got involved in 1892 with the 34 Krag, a rimmed cartridge. Also in 1892, Mauser came back out with his 7x57, or his 7mm Mauser. Once again, that would not have been the kind of bullet that was on there. In 1894, Norway and Sweden came out with the 6.5 Swedish. And then in 1897, you had the 6.5 Arisaka, developed by Japan. And these are not all of them. There's the 6.5 Carcano from Italy in 1891. There's also the American 6mm Lee Navy that came out in 1895, and other ones as well. But all these cartridges would have had a non-pointed, rounded bullet on them. These were some of the OG cartridges to use smokeless powder. Now, if you look at the rims, most of these are rimmed or semi-rimmed, and the only ones that would truly be called rimless would be those three that came from the Patrone 88. Here's the Patrone 88. Here's the Argentine and the 7mm Mauser, both developed by Mauser, but both based on the Patrone 88. Don't be confused about this cartridge. This is not the cartridge that was used in World War I and World War II by Germany, the 8mm, sometimes called Mauser, or the 8x57 German round. That one is extremely similar to this, but it had a different bullet. Actually, though they're both 8mm, it was a slightly different diameter bullet, and it was a pointed or Spitzer bullet, and that would have been in 1905. And so that 8mm that's more common, the 8x57, along with the 7 Mauser, are all based off of this cartridge, the Patrone 88. And like I said, in 1898, the French developed the Spitzer bullet in the 8mm Lebel, and then from that point on, basically all cartridges would move over to a pointed bullet. Now, like I said earlier, the 7mm Mauser was based off of the Patrone 88 cartridge. The Patrone 88 was made by the German government, but the 7 Mauser was obviously made by a person and a company called Mauser, by Peter Paul Mauser. In the Spanish-American War, even though we won that war, we had a rough time. Using our trapdoor Springfields and our 30-40 Craigs, we kind of got our butts handed to us by the Spanish using the 98 Mauser rifle with this, the 7mm Mauser cartridge. So we decided to create a new rifle and a new cartridge. We came up with a 1903 Springfield, kind of a copy of the Mauser, and we developed a new cartridge that same year, the 30-03 Springfield. And 3 years later, we changed it a little bit and came up with the 30-06. The 30-06 is just simply taking a 7mm Mauser, extending it a little bit, making it a little bit longer, and then of course necking it up to 30 caliber. 30-06 has been an overwhelming success, a monstrous success, even to this day. But you can see the cartridges that it owes its lineage to. Now, these two cartridges that you see, one is the 300 Savage, and one is the 22-250. And they both come from a cartridge that came out in 1915 called the 250 3000 Savage, which was the first cartridge ever to break 3,000 feet per second. One thing that's notable about these cartridges is they have the same rimless design, in fact the same dimensions, .473. These two cartridges here, one's the 708, one's the 308. The 708 is just a neck down version of the 308, which came first. Same with a 243, a 260 Remington, a 338 Federal, or a 350 Winchester. They're simply all derivatives of that 308. And you guessed it, the 308 has the same rimless .473 diameter head. This cartridge here is a 6.5 Creedmoor, which came from the 30 TC. The 6.5 Creedmoor has spawned its own little family of cartridges, including the 6mm and the 22 Creedmoor. And you guessed it, they all have the same rimless .473 head diameter. In the 40s and 50s, a gunsmith and gun developer by the name of P.O. Ackley started to try to improve rifle cartridges by straightening out the taper in the sidewalls, sharpening the shoulder angle, giving you more case capacity, and also giving you better brass life. So if a cartridge has been Ackley improved, it is going to simply get a little bit more velocity and have a little bit better brass life. Here you see the 280 Ackley improved. Now I don't have a standard 280, but a 280 is just a neck down 30-06, as is a 270 Winchester, a 25-06 Remington, or a 6.5-06 A square. And then a 338-06 A square and a 35 Whelen are just simply necked up 30-06s. For whatever reason, the only Ackley improved cartridge that ever left the realm of Wildcat and simply just became a standardized SAMI cartridge is this cartridge here, the 280 Ackley improved. So this is a really cool cartridge. You know, it's right up there with 7 PRC and 7 Rim Mag. It might not get quite the velocity of a 7 Rim Mag, but it's not that far off. It's a really cool, efficient cartridge that I do like. But it and the 280 are simply derivatives of that 30-06. These two cartridges that you see, one is a 277 Sig Fury on the left, and on the right it's a 7mm Backcountry. These cartridges employ a high pressure design. There's a tri-metal design on the head or base of the cartridge on the 277 Sig Fury, and then on the right the entire cartridge is made of stainless steel, giving these cartridges around 80,000 psi. So you're going to get a lot more velocity, but yet not have a ton of case capacity. The 277 Sig Fury basically would be a 27 caliber 308 if it wasn't for its high pressure design. And the 7mm Backcountry would basically just be a 280 Remington if it wasn't for its stainless steel design to get that high pressure. And so what you have here is a line of succession from 1888 to basically 2025, except for the 8mm Lebel, which was the cartridge of firsts. The Patrone 88 really is the first cartridge that seemed to be copied by cartridges in the future, all the way down to our most newest cutting edge design cartridge of today. But yet they share a lot of similarities. I think it's pretty obvious, but just in case you're not picking up what I'm throwing down, rimless case design, .473 diameter, exactly the same as the Patrone 88. Now what you see here is the 7mm Backcountry surrounded by some really large magnums. To its left is the 416 Rigby, and to its right is the 375 H&H. As we just talked about, the 7mm Backcountry goes all the way back to the Patrone 88. But over in Britain, about 5 to 10 years after the 30-06 was developed, they started to develop rifle cartridges for dangerous game hunting in Africa. The 375 H&H is the parent cartridge of a lot of cartridges, maybe more than any other cartridge ever. The 300 Win Mag, the 7mm Remington Magnum, the 300 Weatherby, and a whole lot more. The 416 Rigby would become the parent case to cartridges like the Lapuas and also the 378 class Weatherby cartridges. The cartridge on the far right over here is a 6.5 STW, which is a neck down 8mm Remington Magnum, which simply comes from the 375 H&H. And then on the far left over here, you have a 300 Remington Ultra Magnum, which is developed from a cartridge that came out around the same time as the 416 Rigby and the 375 H&H, called the 404 Jeffrey. And a lot of your WSM cartridges and your Nossel cartridges and your rum cartridges like this one are based on that. And so there is kind of a divergent lineage of just putting more and more and more powder in to get a desired result. But it seems like with the 7 Backcountry, it's not more powder, but it's simply higher pressure that can give you good results. Now, not to the same level as these cartridges, but you can cut your barrel down to say 20 inches, put a suppressor on it, and end up with still a very good pressure rating, very good velocity, yet with a smaller barrel. I think these big Magnum cartridges are really cool. The old black powder 4570 that came out long before them, also really cool. As well as this 8mm Lebel, the cartridge of firsts. I mean, you got to put in the 30-06, right? It's just got to be in there. But I decided it was really cool today to show this extremely new cutting edge cartridge and really one of the OG cartridges, the Patrone 88, and how they're so similar and have a really cool lineage. So this has been a fun video. I've enjoyed drinking this coffee, talking about these cartridges. Love to know your thoughts. It could be about the Patrone 88 and the 7mm Backcountry, or it could be about any cartridge I talked about on here today. It's fun to talk old, cool cartridges, so please leave your comment below. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you think it's worth sharing. Hopefully you have a great day, and until next time, take care.